What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's one of those incomplete sentiments we tell ourselves to feel better about danger. And in recent years, there's been a lot of danger in Cincinnati. So many things have tried to kill this team. Injuries, contract disputes, outright fuck-ups, so much frustration and pain. And yet through all of that, we find ourselves back here, once more, with hope. Same weapons, new trenches, and the return of the man holding the gun.
Yo, listen, yeah, that kid is in the jungle. Kid is in the jungle. Kid is in the jungle. Yo, listen, yeah, that kid is in the jungle. Kid is in the jungle. Kid is in the jungle.
Just like that, they're back. And now we can actually complete the quote. It's not that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's that what doesn't kill you will try again. And if the rest of the AFC lets their guard down, this time, they'll succeed. Welcome to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett Coleman. That's EJ Snyder. And what a difference 12 months makes. Because this time last year, I don't want to say we trashed the Bengals, but we expressed our deeply rooted concerns, which unfortunately ended up being true. This year, though, I'm actually very positive about this team. I'm excited about this team. I think, dare I say, they're going to return to the top of the division each. A lot more talented than people think.
I agree with you that they are a lot more talented than people think. I think you might be a slightly more optimistic than I am, but I too believe they are going to rebound from where they were last year. And again, justified in our, I'll say, criticism or at least worries that we presented during the summer series last year on this team. Even though last season was not great results-wise, it's fascinating. And we're going to pull that apart a little bit and see sort of what happened and why. And to me, that's always interesting and leads to building a really good foundation for what we think will happen in 2026.
It's not even really a tale of two seasons. It's like a tale of four seasons because the offense was obviously different with and without Joe. I know productivity-wise, it looked the same to a degree, but I'm talking about the feel of it, the style of it. The Joe Burrow Bengals offense is just different compared to when anybody else is in there, even when they're also throwing for a bunch of yards. And then defensively, not that they were a good defense in the back half of the year, but they were better, right? They were arguably the worst defense, at minimum top or bottom three defense pre-bye. And then post-bye, they kind of got their shit together a little bit and showed me a little something. And they've kind of added on to that this offseason. So offensively, tale of two cities, defensively, tale of two cities, adds up to a team where neither unit ever really got going at the same time, right? Nothing ever came together for them to be the team that they potentially could have been. This year, though, I think their potential is even greater than it was last year. And now that everybody's healthy, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that, and I think they fixed some of their glaring holes on defense, we might actually see the best version of this defense and the best version of this offense at the same time for once. And that's a pretty dangerous team.
Yeah, if that happens, they probably will return to the top of the division, again, given their division mates and how much firepower they have, certainly on offense. And again, if the defense can just be what it was in the last half of last season, I think we're in for a pretty fun ride from the Bengals in 2026. But we do have to talk about 2025. Overall record of 6-11, third in the division, home record of 3-6, road record of 3-5, very similar, and they stumbled down the stretch. Last 5 games, they were 2-3. They were one game better than the Browns, and I think that's fascinating. Given how the national narrative differs around these two teams, they were one win apart. The difference being the Bengals have a quarterback. When Burrow's been healthy, he has been very, very effective and has risen to NFL heights. The Browns don't have anybody like that on the roster outside of Deshaun Watson from how many years ago? So
half decade at this point. Yeah.
That's the difference, is that although these teams on paper were very, very similar, on on balance, when you look at them, and the reason for our optimism for one and not as much the other moving into next season is if Burrow's back and healthy, yes, this team can bounce right back to the top of its division.
Before we get into the effectiveness summary, by the way, I do want to caveat this. We do season-long numbers for this section, right, with EPA per play. They don't necessarily tell the whole story with Cincy for obvious reasons, right? Like Burrow, Flacco, and Browning all got a significant number of starts for this team. Defense, obviously, first half way worse than the second half. So take the overall EPA numbers with a grain of salt. We have a very large infographic that breaks things down in more detail. But when you see the power score, it's going to look like this team is potentially worse than they actually are. I'm just kind of setting the stage here.
Yeah, we talked about it with the Browns yesterday, that power score lied a little bit, that the Browns looked more effective, and that was because their defense was so good and their offense was so bad. Their defense actually pulled up the overall score. When you looked at the product on the field, the film, the tape, the results, it never felt like they were that powerful. Bengals are a little bit different, more of a mixed bag for the reasons we talked about at the top of the show. But power score is made up of 6 numbers: passing EPA per play, rushing EPA per play, defense against the pass, and rush, again, using EPA per play, points scored, and points allowed. Passing EPA per play was 23rd. Again, with a mixed quarterbacking situation. When Flacco came on, it looked pretty good for the first month, and then it kind of mellowed, but it was, to your point, never the Burrow offense. There was never the same feeling of threat or explosion from that. Overall, they ended up 23rd. Rushing EPA per play, they were 6th. We got a caveat for this one too. It's a bit of an asterisk. We'll talk about it. They didn't rush as much as they maybe should have with that number.
Yeah, I mean, they were second highest in pass rate in the entire league. Even though they were good at running the ball, they just didn't want to run the ball. And the way that they were set up with this offensive line, it kind of reminds me a lot of like what the Rams have built in LA, right? Like they have size everywhere. It's a very man-heavy run scheme, like one of the highest percentages of man concepts called in the entire league. I mean, when they were in the gun, there was like 40% man rate, which is obscenely high relative to the rest of the NFL. But it worked, right? They were top 10 in success rate when it came to man blocking concepts. They got about 4.2 yards per carry on those, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they also didn't go backwards on those. Only an 8%, roughly 8.5% rate of getting tackled for a loss or no gain on those. So when you have a really effective downhill run game that when you need 4 yards to give you second and medium, it's going to get you 4 yards. Yeah, on the whole, it's going to be, seen as like the 6th best run game in the NFL because it just doesn't go backwards. Now, explosives wise, yeah, they could use some work on that. And maybe with a higher volume, the success rate would go down. But at least just looking at it on tape, I was like, they're pretty good at that. They're pretty good at just getting the 4 to 5 yard gains that keeps an offense on schedule. And they just refuse to do it. They threw a lot on first down. They threw a lot on second down, like literally the highest first down pass rate and the second highest second down pass rate. And then would get into 3rd and long. And yeah, when you have Joe and Jamar and T, you can bail yourself out of 3rd and long consistently, but they didn't have to do that to themselves. So the one thing I wish for Zach Taylor is that he realizes that he now has an offensive line that, while not elite, is good enough to run the ball. And he has a running back in the backfield in Chase Brown who is effective at running the ball, even if, again, he's not elite. He's not like prime Joe Mixon. I don't know. You have a run game. I would like for them to actually use that run game so that Joe doesn't have to do everything. Maybe they will in 2026.
So passing EPA per play allowed, 28th. Again, over the course of the season, we'll talk about the change, but that's the way in aggregate that it came out at the end. Not very good. Not better against the rush. They were 29th, in fact, a point worse. Points scored, they were 12th, despite all the quarterback changes, which is encouraging. Points allowed, 30th. That's not good enough, and the points differential was 26th. So overall, the raw score, when you take out those top 6 scores, add them up, divide by 6, the raw score is 21.33. That put them 25th overall, which is pretty darn low. And again, if you looked at parts of this team during parts of last season, you would say, oh, they're better than 25th. And you'd be correct. We're going to talk about the places where they were. But overall, when you sum it up, compare them to their peers, they were the 25th most powerful team in the NFL, which is to say, not that powerful. And the bottom line is you got to play some defense. We've talked about this over and over again in the summer series. You don't have to be great at defense. A lot of teams that have ended up top 5 in power score every single season have middling ranks in the defense. They are 18th. They are 16th. They are fine at defense. They are really good at offense, and overall that vaults them up to the top of their rankings. But if you don't play some defense, you're below 500 in the NFL. You just can't survive.
I do want to use that as a jumping off point to preempt some comments, by the way, because when we talk about the run rate or the lack of run rate, some people are going to say, well, yeah, they did have that terrible defense, so they had to throw consistently over and over and over again. Not really, right? If we're looking at their run rate when it's a one possession game, and I'm talking like even in the first 3 quarters, not in the fourth quarter when you really have to go, the difference was 0.4% if it was a one possession game versus not a one possession game. They just didn't run. I don't know why. They just didn't run. And maybe that would have protected their defense a little bit more, by the way, if they controlled the clock. It just wasn't their plan. Like, they wanted to try to jump out with leads on top of people by throwing, and then maybe their theory was, hey, we don't think we can stop the run anyway, so let's take the run game off the board for the other team by building a lead. Like, maybe that's what they were thinking here. Either way, it just, I don't know. It didn't work. I do want to talk about a couple interesting wrinkles, though, that we saw in that offense last year. And this was whether Joe was starting, well, either of the Joes were starting, or really Browning, too, as well. This team ran a lot more 12 personnel than I thought they would. They were 12th highest in 12 personnel. But specifically, it was because Drew Sample was their best pass protector. They didn't use 2 tight ends to create space for each other running routes. They used 1 tight end to run a route, and then they used Drew Sample as a protector. And in fact, he had a lot of snaps this year, essentially as a fullback, doing pass pro in the backfield so that Chase Brown wouldn't. Also, he's just better at it than Chase Brown. And so I don't want to say that their 12 personnel rate was like inflated, but that was a big reason why, is because Drew Sample literally is, in some ways, their third down back as a tight end just because he can protect. So I really want to see them use Sample a lot, similar to that in 2026, as essentially their best pass protector to keep Joe clean. If that means we're running 12 personnel even more just for protection's sake, I'm all for it. But that was an interesting wrinkle that I saw them develop this year to solve a very specific problem, which is we don't believe in our running backs to stop anybody one-on-one. And also, we don't necessarily believe in our young offensive line to pick up stunts either. And I'll tell you what, it worked for the most part.
Yeah, hard to argue with the effectiveness, and a lot of teams will do that with a 6th offensive lineman. Again, the Bengals have struggled to get 5 good offensive linemen on the field for quite a few years. That wasn't the case last year, but when you go for even one more, they thought they were going to get more effectiveness out of Drew Sample, and they did. And they did that by moving him around as well, giving him, I'd say, better angles. We talk about angles in the run game. There's also angles in the pass pro game, right? Not having him necessarily in line all the time, but being able to be in the backfield, pick up rushers from either side. He did a tremendous job at that. Very valuable player who doesn't get a lot of stats, but was really important to their overall offensive attack. So it's cool that we get to shout him out. Part of the reason that Summer Series is a lot of fun. I do want to talk about a really weird wrinkle, because as if this team wasn't weird enough already in terms of being sort of bipolar in its statistical output, Cincinnati tied an NFL record last year with 9 turnovers returned for touchdowns. This is via Jay Morrison, great beat writer in Cincinnati, friend of the show. History suggests you shouldn't expect a repeat in 2026. Jay went one step further, which he always does, and looked at those 4 teams in NFL history that have tied that mark. The 2004 Dolphins, the 1999 Dolphins, the 93 Saints, and the 84 Chiefs. And how they did the next year, was there some through line, some thread that connected those performances, or was it just a weird aberration? And the answer, which is good news for Bengals fans, it's just pretty random. The 2004 Dolphins, the season after, only allowed 1 TD. The 99 Dolphins also allowed 1 defensive TD. The Saints were the only, not quite as great, but it was still half, 5 defensive TDs. And the 84 Chiefs allowed 0 defensive TDs. So 1-1, 5 and 0 were the seasons after those teams allowed the same 9 defensive touchdowns. So don't expect the Bengals to be burdened by that level. Even if it's historically bad again, it's only going to be 2 or 3. We looked it up, and the difference between points allowed and offensive points allowed for the Bengals was worth 3 spots. Those turnovers actually dropped them 3 spots in the rankings for points allowed. So don't count on that run of bad luck continuing, and it's just one more piece of weirdness from the 2025 Bengals.
Yeah, not that like the difference between 26th and 29th is something to hang your hat on, but it's you know, it's something.
Still,
we'll take it.
Still impressive in a bad way.
Yeah. Speaking of that defense, by the way, pre-bye and post-bye were very different, not just because Hendrickson was hurt in the back half of the year, and he played like, I think, 7 games last year. And so that did affect their overall pressure rate, because he was the only guy they had that could actually get pressure. But weirdly enough, despite Hendrickson not being there in the back half of the season, overall they were a better defense. They just had a crippling weakness, which was their defensive line sucked. To put it in perspective, on actual true drop back passes, so non-screen, non-RPO, non-play action, like a real actual drop back, Hendrickson had a 25.2% win rate on those, which is incredibly high. Like, that's really, really good. The next closest Bengal was Miles Murphy at about half that. Not even about half that. Like, I think directly half that, 12.6%. Joseph Osai was at 11.8%. BJ Hill, 10.2%. TJ Slayton, 8.5%. It just gets worse from here, folks. Shamar Stewart, 8%. McKinley Jackson, 6.5%. Chris Jenkins, 5.7%. Good God. Cam Sample, 5.2%. So it was a whole platoon of bad pass rushers.
Yeah.
And yet, they were a lot better in the back half of the year. The one thing they were actually worse at was giving up explosive plays. But once they got into the red zone, right, this team went from 24th in red zone defense pre-bye to 8th in red zone defense post-bye. They were very, very good in the red zone once teams got there. A big reason for that was their secondary. Hugely underrated secondary, in my opinion. You know, have one of the more fun young corners in the league in Turner. And they were also a very man coverage heavy team that let that secondary just be themselves and be good in the back half of the year. 11th highest in man, about 24%, which again doesn't sound that high, but relative to the rest of the league, 24% man rate is actually very, very high. And then in particular on third down, that man rate jumped to 49.4%. So in money downs, they let everybody just line up and play, and they were pretty good at it, at least in the back half of the year. If they had any pass rush whatsoever, the explosives probably would have come down, the negative plays probably would have gone up, and we would have seen this defense, I think, be average in the back half of the season. First half of the season, they couldn't do anything other than just try getting pressure. But in the back half of the year, with how good they were in man coverage, with the improvement of Demetrius Knight, not so much with Carter, but with the improvement of Knight, I think you could argue the arrow was firmly pointing up, and Al Golden was really kind of working his magic there. I am really curious to see if Dexter supercharges them, right? Because you lose Trey Hendrickson, he was your best edge, but they did bring in Mafe, they did draft a kid. You have an actual interior pass rush threat, which their best one last year was 10.2%. Tell you what, Dex at his best is like double that. So I'm really curious to see if he really was the missing piece, kind of like once upon a time DJ Reader was the missing piece. Once upon a time, Geno Atkins was the missing piece here. Like, feels like the Bengals defense is always really good when they have like a dominant DT. Mm-hmm. They were okay in their last 7 games last year. Now they have, on paper, one of the better defensive lines in the AFC and still a good secondary. Linebackers a question. I don't know, man. I know it doesn't look good overall, but if we're looking at trends and if we're looking at players that have been added, is this like the 15th best defense in the league? And is that enough? I think it could be.
It absolutely could be. And their improvement from the beginning half of the season to after the bye week, so after week 10, is wild. It's Jekyll and Hyde stuff. So they allowed an average of 9.3 fewer points over the final 8 games compared to the first 9. That's a huge improvement, while yielding, this number blows my mind, 97 fewer total yards per game in that span.
Unbelievable.
What? Like, that's not right. And you would think, oh, well, that must be when Trey got back from injury. Well, nope, it sure isn't. Or, oh, that's when their rookie who was healing up showed up and came on the scene and torched everybody. No, the personnel was largely the same. They were still minus Trey. Over the final 8 weeks, they were 7th in the NFL in points allowed per game, only 17.9. If you think this Bengals offense can't score 18 points a game, I got news for you. They were tied for 5th in takeaways, and they were 5th in third down percentage overall in that last 8 weeks. The difference between that night and day. Then you add Dexter Lawrence. Yeah, you're still looking for pass rush on the outside, but Dexter will help that for sure because A, he can provide some off the inside, but he is also going to get attention. You are not going to be single teaming Dexter Lawrence if he is healthy and motivated, and he looks to be both with his arrival in Cincinnati. So it could be the piece that really turns this, as well as, hey, the foundation was laid in the back half of last season. They were already playing much better ball. Really glad you brought up Turner. I don't hear very many people talk about him at all. I'm not sure if it's because he plays in Cincinnati. If you are not paying attention to him and Dax Hill, you should be. 2 very good young secondary players in that Bengals defense who are making a difference and are, yes, underrated.
And they also added Takario Davis, too, who's another guy I was a huge fan of. So you potentially have 3 corners that can play. You know, Jalen Davis at nickel, I think you could do worse than that. They brought in Brian Cook. Jordan Battle, kind of whatever on Jordan Battle. But hey, if Kyle Duggar gets back to being what Kyle Duggar was like a few years ago, you have an answer there. Again, Boye Mafe, Jonathan Allen. I forgot Jonathan Allen is going to be Dexter's running mate there at DT.
Yeah, when you look at what they've done to increase, we always say Jimmy's and Joe's, but you mentioned there's 2 Joes and a Jake, so it's Jake's and Joe's, I guess, if we're talking about the offense. Boye Mafe, Dexter Lawrence, Jonathan Allen, right there up front, that looks pretty good. Miles Murphy, again, being the 4th horseman, he doesn't have to be. I know they drafted him high and wanted him to be a preeminent pass rushing threat. That hasn't occurred, but as a rotational, doesn't have to be the leader of that group. I think he is more than serviceable. You mentioned Demetrius Knight coming on in the second half of the season. And then you've got Hill and Turner. Brian Cook, I think, is a good addition for them at free safety. Jalen Davis, like you said, could be a lot worse. When you look at it sort of front to back, that defense has enough firepower, again, to be middle of the road. That's what we're looking for here, Bengals fans, is not to be the best defense in the NFL. And at that point, you let Joe Burrow and all the high-priced talent on offense do their thing and win the game. And that is a winning recipe, and I hope we get to see it. I really hope that everybody stays healthy, the offense, the defense, because there is potential in this team to be very effective and a lot of fun to watch.
They built the defensive line with their blitz rate in mind because this team was dead last in blitz rate last year. And that was with a bad defensive line. Like they were like, we're not going to blitz to help these guys out. Like we're going to either play cover 3 on the back end if it's a rundown. We're going to play quarter, half if it's a pass down. We're going to rush with 4. If it's third down, we'll play man. It was very simple on the back end. But they weren't going to blitz. They were going to let guys win or lose up front, and they largely lost. And so they built this defensive line so they could do that again. Like, we're not going to blitz. We need to be able to win with 4. So it's Cassius, it's Boye, it's Dexter, it's Allen, it's maybe Shamar eventually, maybe Miles Murphy, but they have enough guys now where they could potentially win with 4. And that was like really all they were missing last year was just the ability to win with 4. Well, and their linebackers had really horrible eyes, but they were young. I'll give them a pass. We'll see what Demetrius looks like this year. Again, Carter, it was kind of whatever on that one anyway. But if they have like one good linebacker and a better defensive line and the secondary still plays well, I might even be underestimating them at 15th. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Hi, alternate timeline, Brett here. Before we get to all the 2026 stuff, if you've liked a lot of the data that we brought up so far, we have companion infographics for every single team, including the one we're talking about today, with over 15,000 total data points that we have collected throughout this summer. Each team gets its own companion infographic, which is roughly about 20 pages long. It has all the data on this team you can think of, whether it's alignment data, personnel data, cap allocation, coverage data broken out by down and distance, blitz data. I mean, basically anything you can think of, we've got it. So if you want access to that, you can find that down at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. Reminder, we also have bonus episodes that go live every single Friday over on Patreon, recapping every single division. We're going to pick division winners, MVPs, rookies of the year, all that stuff. So if you want bonus episodes plus more data than you could probably handle, that is over on the Patreon. Thank you once again to all of our patrons that have made, honestly, this series possible to make in the first place. We could not have paid the people who help us make it without your guys' financial support. So thank you to our patrons. Thank you to all of our executive producers on Patreon. Their names are on screen right now. They have been OG supporters of us and made so much in our lives possible while we try to chase this dream. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, let's get back to the show. All right, let's get to 2026, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit, but the rest of this show is really all about, who are the shot callers here, who's the coaches, what are the personnel moves that have been made. We'll go through the draft, we'll go through free agency, all that, and then we'll get into just how far we think this team can go in 2026. Start off with the power structure here, all the shot callers.
Yeah, speaking of, I love shot caller as a title for Duke Tobin because he is the de facto GM. His official title, Director of Player Personnel, but he is the shot caller. He is the day-to-day manager of football operations in terms of roster building for the Bengals. Head coach Zach Taylor, 52-63 over 8 seasons, 5-2 in the postseason. We will talk about the record in the end when we get to ceiling and floor, but certainly higher highs earlier on, and the last 3 years have been tough sledding. Offensive coordinator is Dan Pitcher, 11th season on the Bengals staff, 3rd as the OC. So they do have continuity. Teams scream, we want continuity with our play caller and our quarterback. Bengals have that, which is good news. Defensive coordinator Al Golden, again, I don't have reasons for why, because it's not like there was a coaching switch. If you look on the Bengals website, it almost reads like, led the Bengals to defensive improvement after the bye. And you're like, was he promoted or did his role change? No, he was there the whole time. It just took that long to get rolling. I don't have any other explanations. But once they got rolling, we talked about how good they were. So again, can he manage a defense that is in the middle of the NFL and that's good enough to put you back in the playoffs? He obviously can. He just has to do it, but he has even more pieces this year. Special teams coordinator is Darren Simmons. In terms of assistant coaches, the tight end run game coordinator, got to mention him, James Casey, your guy.
Houston legend. Let's go.
There you go. Can't skip it if it's a Houston legend. First with the run game coordinator title. So he's been coaching tight ends 8 years in Cincinnati. This year he gets the added run game coordinator title. So maybe he's your guy. Maybe he listens to this episode and goes, hey.
Meaning he'll actually call.
He'll do it.
The run.
He'll do it.
By the way, they did run quite a bit from 12 personnel as well. They had a lot of success when they were in 12 personnel gun with those man concepts, which I know, narrow cone, didn't do it a lot, but like they were good at it. And maybe just him being in the ear of Dan Pitcher of like, samples in the game, like use him as a fullback, whatever you got to do.
It's worked the last 5 times. Maybe we should try it. What do you say? The running backs coach will also be in Casey's ear and probably Pitcher's ear. That's Justin Hill, 6th season with the Bengals coaching running backs. Scott Peters is a big part of that. He's the offensive line coach. Troy Walters, former NFL wide receiver himself, is in charge of that fantastic group of wideouts. The senior defensive assistant, which is that sort of modular title of problem solver. We're going to give you issues each week and have you pull them apart, is Sean Desai. Now, Sean Desai has a long history with the summer series. We've called him out, highlighted him several times on several different teams. Seems he's sort of fallen out of that hot spotlight favor, but got a job in Cincinnati last year. This is his second year there. And if you look at that second half defensive turnaround and how well the players in the secondary specifically are playing, because Sean Desai's early defensive specialty was in the secondary and coordinating secondaries, you can kind of draw the line between the two and say probably had something to do with that. And the defensive line coach, again, with all that new talent, and the defensive run game coordinator is Jerry Montgomery, second season in the same role, 12th on an NFL coaching staff, and he will be tasked largely with developing not only the new additions through trade, but also the guys we're going to talk about in the draft.
Free agency recap. Not a ton of turnover here, at least turnover for like major pieces, but still a few notable names to get through. Trey Hendrickson, we all saw that one coming. Obviously a really weird situation for him this offseason because of the Max Crosby domino not falling in Baltimore, which then opened up Baltimore as a destination for him to go. So he ended up being in the division. So we'll talk about him more in the Ravens episode tomorrow. But yeah, kind of a wild 72 hours there in the NFL with Max ended up not leaving. Then Trey went there. Yeah, whole thing. Noah Fant is now in New Orleans. Joseph Osai is now with the Jets. Jake Browning is a Buck. Cam Taylor-Britt is thankfully far away from Cincy at this point. He is now with Indianapolis. Geno Stone, even farther from Cincy at this point. Probably good for Bengals fans. He's in Buffalo. And then one last one, Lucas Patrick. He's now a Giants. Didn't play a whole lot for them last year, but might get a bunch of snaps for the Giants. So I thought that was notable.
Yeah, talk about shipping some bad luck out of town. We talked about that fumble stat and defensive touchdowns allowed by the offense. Noah Fant alone had 3 fumbles returned for touchdowns. Now, it's pretty hard to return a fumble for a touchdown. To have one player that had 3 that got taken back is just like, okay, look, man, it's not going to work out. We're just going to...
That's just handing it to the linebacker and saying, go ahead, bro.
We don't want you on the team playing anymore. No offense, but we want to actually make it back home. So he ends up with the Saints. Just an incredible run of bad luck for him with Cincinnati. Gets a fresh start in New Orleans. In terms of money that the Bengals used to re-sign their own, lots of names. We'll put them all up on screen, but 3 big ones. Dalton Risner played 69% of the snaps for the Bengals last year. I lied. There's actually 4. Joe Flacco obviously comes back. He was very serviceable and then some as a backup leading this team when Joe Burrow went down. Orlando Brown Jr., they lock up for $16 million, which is pretty low considering the overall tackle pay rate in the NFL. And then Jalen Davis, the cornerback we talked about earlier, is 30 and they get him for 1.5, but right now scheduled to be a starter. We'll see whether or not that shakes out through camp.
Mitchell Tinsley erasure. The greatest August receiver in the history of the NFL, Mitchell Tinsley. Excited to see what he does.
We did a fun show over on Bear Era talking about all-time Bears draft, but we did all-time weird categories. We didn't just do like best Hall of Famer or best middle linebacker. We did. And one of our categories was basically training camp hero. And the rules were that you couldn't use the same guy for any category. So if somebody had been picked already, but I got the top slot. We did like a rotating kind of snake draft thing, and I got the top slot in that one. It was easy. It was Dane Sossenbacher.
Best shape of his life every year.
Yeah.
Just like Dio. He's motivated this year. Yeah. Motivated Dio.
Oh, my God.
Defensive player of the year.
Did you... Oh, side note, rabbit hole. Did you see the Madden Ultimate card? And it literally says motivated Dio Dempo. I'm in a Bears chat, and the name of the chat is now the Motivated Bears chat, basically. It's been that way for about 4 months. Good. I know. Everybody locked onto that one. He's motivated.
Well, speaking of motivated, Kyle Duggar better be, because I mean, he was in line to be the guy in New England. Like, he was going to get the crazy safety money that you see at the top of the safety market now. And last couple of years just haven't gone his way. He's 30 now, so, you know, he's trying to make the best of it. He's now going to be a backup and or role player on this defense. But, man, young Kyle Duggar, I thought was a really good player, and it just, I don't know what happened. Boye Mafe, still young. Well, ish. He's 28, but like he's going to get another contract in his NFL career. So he's on what can conceivably be called a 2-year deal, but it's the Bengals. So even when there's no guarantees left, they do tend to let it. They still like to keep guys even when there's no guaranteed money, which has been the root of some of their problems in the past. So you could argue this is more than a 2-year deal, but it's just a front-loaded deal for them, and a relatively cheap number too, like $20 million in the current edge market, especially with a front-loaded deal. So in year 3 of it, it's actually not going to cost them a lot. You're just getting a lot of the pain out of the way now. I actually like that a lot for their long-term flexibility. And then Jasir Taylor they brought in. Dexter Lawrence obviously was a huge one. Massive trade at the top of the draft. And considering the players that were on the board at the time and the needs of the Bengals at the time, they needed a game-changing defensive player. There were none of them other than arguably Ruben Bain. But I don't think they were really looking for edge. I think they were looking for something else. And I think Dexter Lawrence obviously was worth that pick. So I thought it was a good trade for the Giants. I think it's a good trade for the Bengals. They both got what they needed. The Bengals weren't going to get a player that is guaranteed to be as good as Dexter Lawrence other than just getting Dexter Lawrence. So love that trade for them. And then Brian Cook, they also brought in at $13.4 million. Speaking of the safety market climbing, great number for him. He's going to be a starter immediately. Overall, I love what they did, right? It was a financially responsible deal for Mafe. It was it was an appropriate trade for Dexter Lawrence. The Brian Cook number was totally fine for me. You get Kyle Duggar for nothing to be your third safety. You jettison some players that weren't really doing anything for you. I say this is a good March.
Yeah, targeted for sure. Mafe has been a favorite of ours since the draft. Had a good run in Seattle. The carpet is laid wide open right here. He can march into town and be a savior. If he ends up even getting 8 or 9 sacks and a bunch of pressures in this defense, this will be regarded as the move that they needed. It's maybe even more possible that happens, dovetailed with the Dexter Lawrence trade, because again, Dex is going to take a lot of heat on the inside. He's got a certain gravity to him in terms of offensive focus, and that's going to allow Mafe to have more one-on-ones or one-on-1.5s that he can win, and all the way down the line, whether it's Myles Murphy or a guy we're going to talk about at the top of the draft, and Cassius Howell, who's probably going to be a DPR to start off. They're all going to get more and better opportunities having a guy like Dexter Lawrence. Bengals did not have that player last year. They looked very different. They do this year, and now those guys on the edge can hopefully flourish and thrive. It's up to them and the coaches, obviously, for them to do that, but there's a better possibility that it occurs this year.
One little added note on the Mafe deal, by the way, 3rd year of this contract for him, only 6.2% hit against the cap. Trey Hendrickson's 3rd year in Baltimore is 10.1%, which is basically just going to get cut no matter what.
Yeah.
Like there's no way he's not. They save like $23.5 million in Baltimore if they cut him in 2028. So again, low-ish cap hit for Mafe in the 3rd year. He's only going to be 31. Compared to the deal that Hendrickson ended up getting from Baltimore, he's going to be 34, 35 around then. I'd say that's a worthy trade-off for them. So again, good work by Duke Tobin on that front, which brings us to the draft. They didn't stop there with Mafe. They brought in another edge as well. They're just going to keep drafting and signing them until they get a good rotation here. They didn't have a pick until the 41st overall pick because of the Dexter trade. So if we just count Dex as their first rounder, fine, I'm good with that. Cassius Howell was their first actual pick in the draft. Edge out of A&M, very different profile compared to a lot of the other edges they have on this team. And I liked that. I like that they brought in the changeup, right? The smaller, bendy, quicker flamethrower. Like he is a pure pass rushing edge. I don't really think he's big enough to hold up against the run, but that's okay. We have big edges that can hold up against the run. We have hulking defensive tackles. We have a young linebacker, Knight, who I really like. We have these big ass safeties.
Yep.
Use them, right? So having our guy that's just there for 3rd and 7, and he's dirt cheap relative to the other guy that we used to have for 3rd and 7. I like that pick a lot, even if he only does one good thing for us, and that's just be our speed rusher off the edge. 41st overall pick for that contract, I'm good with that.
Yeah, this is a zig from their typical zag. They have gone for larger, typically stiffer, longer defensive ends, guys who can lock out, hold the edge, and push with power, typically is their profile. Cassius Howell is not that guy. Shorter, about 240 pounds, very, very quick. One of the true good first step guys in this draft class. It's how he got a lot of his pressures at A&M. They are counting on him to do that. Again, we talked a lot about 4-3 and 3-4 a couple of years ago. Bengals have typically played 3 defensive tackles and either an edge or 2 edges, putting them in a classic 3-4. He's custom built for that, right? As your light linebacker, outside, rushing off the edge, a DPR in a NASCAR package. Like Cassius Howell is that guy because not only can he use that speed around the edge, he's also lightning quick through gaps on stunts and just really hard to get a handle on because, again, he's not that tall. When he dips the shoulder, it is a very small target to try and catch up with. So a nice addition for their pass rush, gives them another flavor, gives offenses something else to worry about that, again, the Bengals typically haven't had. Their room of pass rushers has typically looked a little bit different physically, so I like the changeup. We always talk about diversity within the rooms. Then we go down to round 3, pick 72, Tacario Davis, the guy you mentioned, the cornerback out of Washington. A Husky local to me. Really tall, really long, knows how to use that length, and isn't necessarily a burner, but doesn't need to be because he understands how to weaponize his length in pass coverage down the field. He can be a step and a half behind, still get his hands up into the passing lane. He is light, he can elevate to do that, and he's just a menace. He blocks out a huge piece of the passing lane, and I think was more effective than a lot of people gave him credit for. I really like the value of this pick, getting him in the 3rd round at 72, because I believe he can develop into a starter in the NFL.
I mean, he's a 6'4" press corner with almost 34-inch arms that doesn't miss tackles. What's there not to love? I thought this was a great pick for them. Dax Hill, I can't remember how many years left he has. He might have 1 off the top of my head. I have to double check on that. So, this is, I think, their future option at corner if they don't want to extend Dax. I think DJ is going to be there for a long time, but this is a future starting corner for them. The injury issues, I think, is why he really fell more so than long speed. Because if you watch him on tape, speed wasn't really an issue for him. He was always in position, and when somebody that long is in position, it's kind of hard to fit the throw-in around him. So I like Tack Davis a lot. If he could stay healthy, I could see him getting a significant amount of snaps this year, and especially in the future. I think he's going to start for them eventually.
Yeah, it's tremendous insulation at the cornerback position, which, again, is a high-dollar position, whether you are talking about extending contracts or getting guys in free agency. So if you can hit on a player that you get in the 3rd round of the draft and they become a starter, that is an absolute win. So going into the 4th round, their next pick is Connor Lew, the center out of Auburn. More of a man-blocking type, which goes perfectly in line with what you were talking about in terms of their run scheme. Powerful guy, SEC experience, not as much sort of in the wide zone flavor that a lot of centers were in this draft, and stood out because of that and fits very well for them. I could see him being a starter. The Bengals have been good at picking mid-round offensive linemen who eventually played reasonable roles on their offense, and Connor Lew definitely has the bona fides and the physical profile to be able to do that.
The only thing standing in his way is Ted Karras. That's not an insurmountable obstacle long term. Obviously, he's not going to play this year, but long term, yeah, he could push for their starting center job. And considering the starting center market is all of a sudden $27 million a year, I think going cheap on that starting in 2027 is probably going to be very prudent for them, because he makes, not $27 million.
No,
I'll tell you that much. So, yeah. By the way, that Linderbaum contract, we're going to talk about that in the Ravens episode.
Yeah, that's coming.
Good Lord.
Yikes. We want to talk about a market resetter. Yeah, fascinating. But the Bengals going cheap, I've never heard of it. I know their fans are going to absolutely bite on that one. They're
No,
not
they
cheap.
acknowledge it. They're like, yeah, we wouldn't pay Trey Hendrickson $27 million. We're not going to pay a center $27 million.
What are you talking about? The other pick they have in the 4th round at 140, Colby Young, the wide receiver out of Georgia. And I know a lot of people with the wide receiver rotation in Cincinnati looked at this and thought, it's nice to have another one. I'm interested to see where he fits in the offense because with his speed, I think he could nibble some wide receiver 3 reps in this offense.
But again, Mitchell Tinsley's back, so I don't know. It's gonna be really tough. Because Tinsley always looks great, like in camp, in preseason,
Agreed.
in practice. Like he's just there, and that's an obstacle that other receivers have to get around. Like the competition isn't for wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. The competition is for like wide receiver 4,
right,
on this team, maybe 3, and. If this is insulation against injury, cool. I totally get it. It was just an interesting pick to spend a 4th rounder when you already have the most expensive receiving core in the NFL. And if they're starting to gravitate more towards 12 personnel anyway, it's not like they're going to be a put everybody on the field and spread them out type team. I don't think they want to do that. They've tried it in the past, didn't work. So yeah, interesting pick. Like I don't hate the player. Mm-hmm. I don't hate the value of the pick itself. It's more so I was like, we kind of had bigger fish to fry.
Multiple bigger fish to fry when you look at this wide receiver room. Again, you got Chase, Higgins, Yoshivas, Charlie Jones erasure. If we're erasing somebody, it's not Mitchell Tinsley, it's Charlie Jones in my mind. But Colby Young becomes the 5th or 6th one in order there. And again, as a 4th rounder, it's like, well, you already had 4 to 5 good options, which is better than a lot of NFL teams. They obviously like Colby Young. They pick him there in the 4th round. And then in the 6th round, they get Brian Parker II, who is listed as a center out of Duke, and that might well be his best position in the pros. But my favorite thing about this pick is that Brian Parker has flexibility. In my mind, he's very much an interior offensive line version of Elgton Jenkins. I don't want to play him at tackle in the NFL. He has some experience playing there in college, but he can play all 3 interior offensive line positions and a very good player. I thought this was maybe a slightly overlooked player based on his talent and versatility. To be able to get him almost down at 200, again, 6th round, pick 189. Tremendous value. I thought this was a great pick by the Bengals.
They've done this a couple times in a row now, right? Because Jalen Rivers was also another one of those, like, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Mm-hmm. Get him out there and figure it out, right? So they're just kind of accumulating versatile bodies that can play multiple spots for them. And, if you're looking at a game day roster, you're not carrying, 10 offensive linemen during a game. You're carrying 7, maybe 8, depending on the situation that you're going into. So having a guy that can be a swing guard and a center, or a guy that can be a swing tackle and a guard, those backup linemen tend to play for a long time just because you don't get to carry backups for every single individual lineman on game day, and the more you can do, the better.
Moving into the 7th round, I'm just going to say this flat out without checking my notes because I think it's pretty fair. This is my favorite 7th round in the entire draft. So 7th round, pick 221, they get Jack Endries, the tight end out of Texas, who is not a 7th round tight end based on talent. This was an injury thing. I had Endries as the 5th best tight end in this draft. I love this player, and when he is healthy, he is incredibly productive and has the talent to be a TE1 in the National Football League. The only reason they get him down in the 7th at 221 is a lengthy injury history, and if he comes out healthy, this will look like a steal. If he doesn't, it's fine. It's a lottery pick in the 7th round. The other pick, 5 picks later, 7th rounder, 226, Landon Robinson, the interior defensive tackle out of Navy. And you mentioned a Bengals great, Geno Atkins, earlier. And I'm not saying that Landon Robinson is Geno Atkins because he's not, but he plays a similar role, undersized, slashing, 3-tech, who is wildly disruptive. Not the most developed game, but if there is such a thing as a DPR for a DT, designated pass rushing DT, Landon Robinson is your guy.
Yeah, we have Kalijah Cansey at home, and it's Landon Robinson. I like the pick, though. Like, 7th rounder?
Exactly.
Taking an undersized, bendy, quick, does one thing and one thing only, add him to the rotation. Like, yeah, sure. Why not? Like, we're not spending a top 50.
No.
Which that body type and role has gone top 50 before and sometimes does not work out, by the way. Like, pick 226. Yeah, I'm all on board with that. And then injuries at 221. To your point, yeah, injuries dropped him there. He was not a 7th round tight end.
No.
And with the current tight end room that they have, because remember, Sample's still there. He's their best blocker. You got Gesicki, who's essentially a power slot. You got Eric All, who, you know, what could have been if he would stop getting injured. He was really talented in college. And now you got Jack Entries there, plus 3 other guys like Tanner Hudson's there, Cam Grandy's there. They're probably going to carry 4 on the roster, and they have a diversity of skill sets there where they could run a bunch of 13 personnel, not even just 12 personnel. So I am fascinated by this because in some ways their deep tight end room also gives them a little bit of insulation from wide receiver injury. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, okay, if Jamar goes down and tees the 1, we can operate in 13 personnel when we only have 1 receiver on the field anyway. Or if T goes down again and we just have Jamar out there, we can run 13 personnel and be okay. Or if it's Jamar and Yoshevich, we can be in 12 and be fine. Like, as long as they have that tight end room and Chase Brown and the balls to run the ball at least a little bit, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of grab bag of tight ends that have all these different skills. Maybe the island of misfit toys is the right analogy, but they all can do things to a defense. It's about them staying healthy. And again, are they going to prioritize that on offense, or are they going to look at all the money they have invested in wide receiver and go, man, we got to get 2 and sometimes 3 wide receivers out there more often because that's our best chance to score points.
As far as UDFAs, Eric Gentry was brought in here to be something. I don't really know if he's a linebacker. Do they see him as a nickel? Is he an edge? I have no idea. He's such a weird body type, right? Because he's this 6'6", spindly, super light. He looks like a basketball player, honestly. Like, he looks like a shooting guard. I don't know what he's going to be in the NFL. And I think that's ultimately why he went undrafted, is because nobody knows what he's going to be in the NFL. It's a weird football player. But it's worth taking a shot, bring him into a camp, try him in different spots, see what he can do. If he weighed like 245, I would feel better about the profile, but he doesn't. And I don't know if he can weigh 245. Yeah. I feel like he's tried to get up there before and he just can't put on the weight. So I'm fascinated to see what he does. I don't know if it's going to work.
No.
But, it's UDFA.
Yeah, this is this is your poker chip. If there's any bit, and I'm talking like 30 or 40% of Leonard Floyd in there and you got him for free, okay, cool. That's a versatile piece that I, again, can put outside, flex out, maybe match up with a tight end. Like, there's a lot of different things that he can do. Is he great at any of them? No, that's why he went undrafted, but he's got a very interesting physical skill set, not only from a size perspective, but also a movement perspective. He just doesn't fit in typical NFL boxes. So if they can be creative with him, he could find a role here for sure.
And then last one here, Sayer Wright, the corner out of Nebraska. Tough CB room to crack.
Yeah, just can't quit those Nebraska CBs.
Can't quit them. But, I mean, I could see him being practice squad. I don't think he's going to make Final 53 just because the corner room is good enough that I can't find a spot for him. But, if the goal is to make a practice squad and then, be called up in case of injury and develop and, try to get a job on an active roster in 2027, I think he can do that. Talented player. I just don't know if he's going to make the Final 53.
Yeah, talented player, good size profile, runs pretty well, real good in a straight line. Cutting ability is not the greatest, but he's tough. If you're going to play defense at Nebraska, you better be. And again, some teams just have relationships with programs where they like players of a certain type to come out of that program. And certainly the Bengals have picked Nebraska corners before. So here they don't even have to spend a pick on him. They get him as a UDFA, add him to the room, and we're off to the races.
Before we get to our last segment of the show, I do want to shout out one of our partners over at Homage, Ohio-based company, by the way. They're based in Columbus, so if you're an Ohio State fan and a Bengals fan, which I'm sure many of you are, and you want to support not just them, but also us indirectly, anything you get at Homage, whether it's Bengals merch, Ohio merch, or whatever your college is, or favorite movie franchise, favorite game franchise, favorite comic franchise, or bootleg merch, doesn't even matter what you get, anything you get at that link below or at the QR code on the screen, like directly benefits the show. So you can support us while supporting our sponsors, while supporting your team all at the same time. And we appreciate those of you that have already done that throughout this series. It really has helped us a lot. Want to thank you all for that. EJ, we have one more segment here, and that's patron viewer note into ceiling and floor. By the way, reminder, if you are a patron and you want to submit notes or questions or anything like that for any of these episodes, obviously those are also over on our Patreon, in addition to the infographics and the bonus content. But this comes from Tanner Hall. It says, fan of ball, if the Bengals don't work in the next 2 seasons, is there a genuine possibility that this roster gets blown up? Whether Joe can't stay healthy or the offense can't drag that paltry defense to the playoffs, it seems like there's a point where the Bengals should cut ties and get max value while Joe and Jamar are still young. First things first, I don't think the defense is that paltry anymore.
Yeah.
For every reason we talked about throughout this show, I really don't think they're going to be that bad. I think they'll be average. They could be above average, but I think they're going to be average. And I don't think it's the offense dragging the defense anywhere in 2026. And I still think the offense is going to be good too. Like, it's a balanced team. It's a good team. I think they're going to win the division. Spoiler alert for the Patreon episode. I don't think they're going to need to blow anything up. And also, there's not really going to be anything to blow up. If you're looking at, let's say the next 2 years, 2026, 2027, it doesn't work out. You get to 2028. What do? They only have 34 players under contract for 2028. That's not a lot. Like, that's bottom third in the NFL in terms of committed contracts into 2028. There are teams that have in the mid 50s of contracts that are out to that season. So they don't even have to blow it up. They could just kind of let the roster stand as it is now and then just walk away from bad contracts and actively replenish through the draft and free agency as they go. That is the one advantage to their team building style, is that they don't back themselves into a corner financially, right? They like to do front loaded contracts. They like to do minimal guarantees. They avoid dead money like the plague. Yes, I think it's kind of a cheap way to build a team, because I always feel like they're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, even when they pay their core, right? You pay Joe, you pay Jamar, you pay T. I still feel like in other areas of the team, they've kind of built more based on fears than goals, right? If the fear is don't be committed to money for guys that you don't think are going to be on the roster in a couple of years, compared to the goal of winning a Super Bowl. And I think there are teams around the league that build based on goals, not fears. Look at the Eagles, look at the Rams. I think the Bengals have generally built more based on fears than goals, even with all the money they spent on quarterback and receiver. But the advantage of that is that they're not going to have any bad contracts in 2028. There's going to be nothing to blow up. They're not going to be in a corner. They're going to have space. They're going to have money. And if the only expensive core players that they even have at that point are Joe, Jamar, T, maybe an offensive lineman if Mims works out, they have to give a big contract to Mims, maybe Turner at that point, but corners, they tend not to get paid the closer they get to 30, so maybe that won't even be an issue for them. There's just not going to be a lot of bad contracts on the team. So I don't think there's anything to blow up. I think they do have a window here, 26 and 27. I think they could legitimately go on a run, but I don't think it's similar to God, who's in real trouble here? Like the Steelers, right? Where all of a sudden, Steelers fans are like, oh shit, do we have to trade TJ? Can we afford this? Because they're looking at what their cap situation is going to be like next year, and they're like, oh God, are we boned here. I don't think it's like that. I think the Bengals, because of the way they built this team, they're in a better financial spot than people think.
Yeah, it's certainly possible that we see a wholesale house cleaning, especially if they finally decide to show Zach the door. But that's going to be based more on the flavor that the new coaching staff wants in the roster and less on economic necessity, to your point. They don't have to blow it up monetarily. It's more going to be about, hey, we've been doing this for a while. We've gotten these results. We want to change. Whoever comes in says, yeah, I'm going to get players who I think are representative of that change and can help me towards it. That would be the reason that we would see it, not because they ran up against some economic wall, especially with the cap continuing to increase. Now, I'm going to acknowledge it is certainly frustrating for Bengals fans to have some of the best players in the NFL at their positions and keep generally seeing midline results year after year. That is the, why? I think it goes to show that creating championship teams in the NFL is not easy, and that you have to have a lot of things break your way in order to have that happen in any given season. There is an element of luck, that there is an element of that plays into health. There is certainly good decision making. There are development turns for players that go positively or negatively. All of those things have to work in concert. I know sometimes we break it down and pull it apart and say, well, they don't have a quarterback, they're not going anywhere. That's true, but that's more of a floor setter. Having a quarterback gets you in the door. After that, all those other things, coaching, development, injuries, schedule, weather, you name it, come into play in a given season. And that's why winning a championship in the NFL is so magical and so difficult to do. And once you do it, so difficult to do again, because there are just a lot of factors that are out of your control. In this case, money's not going to be the one that blows up the Bengals. It's more going to be a change of heart of, we've been going this direction for a while now. We want to change direction. And because of that, some of these players have to go.
So given that, what do you feel is their ceiling for this season? Like, is this an almost kind of year, or is this a year where you realistically think they could pay off this window that they've kind of created for themselves out of nowhere?
For sure. I'm going to go back to history, and history being the last 5 years, recent history for this team. And it's both a plus and a minus that blend together into my answer. My ceiling is 10 for them, but let me take you back. So going in reverse order from last year, the last 5 finishes for this team: 6-11, 9-8, 9-8, 12-4, and all the way back in 2021, 10-7. And what happened at the end of the 2021 season?
They did get to the Super Bowl.
They did get to the Super Bowl. So a 10-win ceiling for this team is not a death knell by any stretch. I think this team is going to be far better than the one we saw last year. I think, again, given their division and their up and down performance over recent history. Again, 9-8 in 2023 was good enough for last in the AFC North. 9-8 the next year was good enough for third, and then 6-11 last year was also strangely good enough for third. So AFC North is a weird neighborhood, but 10 wins is what they had when they reached the Super Bowl. So that's my ceiling for them. I think they're going to play better both on offense and defense, health withstanding, of course. And my floor for them is 6. Right? If we see the injuries again, they're still a really talented roster. They're never going to be a 3 or 4 win team. But if they struggle, Flacco's another year older, which makes him, I don't know, AARP worthy at this point, I think. So you just can't count.
Still effective, though. I'll give him that.
Yeah, especially in that first 3 to 4 weeks when he came in. He looked really good. So I kid, but you can't count on all the things that worked for you last year when the wheels fell off. Again, the turnover luck is probably going to regress. That's a good thing for the Bengals. They're more likely to stay healthy. But even so, this is a team that has performed somewhere in the middle. A 10-win season would be literally their best since 2022, and only their third double-digit win season since 2021. So 10, I think, probably gets them in the door, whether that's as the first seed in the AFC North, or whether it's wild card. Doesn't really matter. They got to get into the dance. If they do, they're a dangerous team, and they could go right up to the big game.
I'll caveat my ceiling and floor with I am assuming quarterback health,
For sure.
which is a dangerous thing to do.
Especially with this team.
I am reminded that they only had Joe for, I think, 9 starts last year, and they still won 6 games with a pretty horrific defense for the first 9 weeks of the season.
Yep.
And they still won 6 games. So for me, my floor with healthy Joe and with the improved defense, which we do not just think is improved, we know it's improved. We saw it happen in the back half of last year. My floor is 8. If Joe gets hurt again, okay, yeah, we can discuss that. But everything that could have went wrong last year, and they still went 6-11. So for me, that's very encouraging. I'll put my ceiling at 11 just because it's the AFC North. Nobody's allowed to run away with the first seed in the AFC North. It rarely ever happens. They all beat each other up. It's actually kind of a miracle that the Ravens have done that before, because normally they get wins ripped off them by Cleveland, Cincy, and Pittsburgh every year. I feel like same thing's going to happen to the Bengals this year. Pittsburgh's going to take one off them. Baltimore's going to take one off them. Cleveland, even them, can take a win off of them just because it's a weird fucking division and always happens. They're like the NFC South, but on the AFC side. So I think 11 is appropriate. They're not going to be the first seed, but they are going to host a playoff game. And don't let them into the division round. I'll tell you that much. Do not let this team in the division round. Because if you get them to the final 4 teams in the conference, are you super confident that New England can sustain through them through a miracle Burrow Jamar T fourth quarter? Are you super confident that Denver can do it? Are you super confident? Well, fuck, I'm not confident in any AFC South team doing it. Like, you let this team in the division round when there's 4 teams left and they got to win 2 games to go to the Super Bowl. I might take them over any AFC team because I know what they can do and I know what we've seen them do before. So kill them early if you can, which generally that's what's happened the last 3 years. You don't let them get to the playoffs, but if you let them get in, they're a threat to everybody.
Yeah, or they've killed themselves. But the most AFC North stat I can leave you with is that, again, in 2021, they were 10-7 and they were first in the AFC North. 2 years later, they were 1 game worse. They were 9-8 and they were 4th in the AFC North.
Very AFC North.
Very AFC
Very,
North.
very AFC North. Well, we're continuing with this very weird division tomorrow. We got the Ravens episode, of course, and then we follow up with the Steelers the day after that. If you want to watch the Ravens episode right now, it does go live early, 24 hours early, over on Buzzer. They've been helping us out with production throughout the summer series, and we've been eternally grateful for everything they've done for the show. A reminder to check out Buzzer. It's an entirely new sports content-focused platform, and every single episode goes live 24 hours over there before getting posted on YouTube. So if you want to see the Ravens episode, you can see it there, either at the QR code on the screen or at the link down below. Thank you once again to Buzzer for partnering with us on this series. Thank you to Homage. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our patrons, all of our executive producers. It's been a wild ride so far. We are almost halfway through. Doesn't feel like it, but we're almost halfway through. And we will see you tomorrow and or today with the Ravens.